The one strategy I would say is to find your moment each day that is your moment, minus the mornings. And I would say when I get up and I put my feet on the floor in the mornings, I say to myself, and I put my finger up in there and I say, the mornings are mine. And I do things that are specific to what I want to do for my morning. Some people it's drink coffee out on the porch. I don't drink coffee, but some people that's their thing. It's whatever is your thing. And the thing that can center you and give you a moment of pause before you start your day. Some people may need to do it in the afternoon. Some people may do it late at night. Maybe go in your bedroom, shut the door, and have that peaceful time before you drift off to sleep. But have a time that's for you to center yourself and be at peace with yourself, at peace with the world.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Small Talk. I'm your host, Chris Phillips, and joining me today is Angel Diane, the author of Waiting Well, Winning Strategies for Your Waiting Season.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So initially on our phone call the other day, you told me that it took 18 years for all this book to come together and for you to finish it.
Yes.
What was the initial thing that inspired you to write the book?
I had been hearing kind of just some maybe prophetic words or just some encouraging words from the Lord. And I would sit down at my computer occasionally and type those out. I was actually a hairdresser at the time. And so as I would talk with people and minister to people, because when you're doing hair, you're almost a therapist, when you're spending so much time personally, so close to somebody, you get to know them and they tell you everything. And I just had kind of just after people would leave, just prophetic words would come to me. And I didn't know it was a prophetic word at the time. Just words would just kind of download in me. So I would sit down at my computer and type out some things. And one day I was typing out something and I read back over it, just looking for typographical errors. And as I was reading it, I thought to myself, wow, that's a pretty good paragraph there, and I heard the Lord say to me, this is how I will pay for your ministry. So I ran upstairs and told my husband, guess what? I'm going to start a ministry and God's going to pay for it by my writing. And I've never written anything, and my husband's like, okay, and I thought, when you're young and you hear something like that, you think, okay, I see the vision. It's going to be so blissful and easy and happy and joyous and all the good things, and it is all the good things, but I did not realize what I would have to walk through in my life and the serious times I would have to have and the hurtful, painful things that I would have to face to be able to be qualified to not just hear God's voice, but to be able to relay what he's saying correctly.
When all those initial, writing and jotting, what did that kind of look like?
It was just basically my thoughts. And I did not realize how Southern I sounded. I did not realize how country I sounded in my writing. I knew I would sound that way in speaking, but I had no idea that would come through and be relayed in my writing. And as I was reading it back, I could understand what I was saying, but when I would have somebody else read it, they're like, that's a good thought, but it really needed some work, and it still needs work to this day, so I've had to work on every form and facet of writing, as you can imagine.
Yeah, because I like journaling and things myself, and sometimes when you're just jotting, it makes sense in the moment.
To you, it makes perfect sense because you write it how you speak it. But honestly, when you're writing, sometimes you don't do that. It just seems like you have to really think about it, and you have to think about how it's going to be understood from the reader. A lady was editing this book, Waiting Well, in Florida, and she said, I have one problem with your writing. And I said, what? She said, when you use the word it. And I said, what? She said, we don't know what it means. I said, well, in the paragraph above, I stated what I was talking about. She said, no, but every time you go back to it, you need to reiterate what you're speaking of, because you could have changed your mind as a writer to talk about it. So when you say, I want to do it, you need to say, I want to go to the store. I've got to explain. So it's a little different when you're writing.
Right. Just being more specific.
Specific, yes.
In the book, you told me that it touches over 8 different seasons of your life
Mm-hmm.
throughout the
Yes.
book. Could
Yes.
you elaborate on some of the seasons that maybe, you went through in order to come up
Yeah.
with the concept of this book?
Yes. The main thing that finally, after 18 years, kind of set me on course to write. Now, over the 18 years, I kept writing, and nothing was panning out to be a full book.
Right.
Everything was just thoughts, and I had one lady look over at one time, and it seemed like it was just maybe more sermons than it was, chapters of a book. And so just I had to navigate all of that, and a lot of it the writing I did up until that point was just seasons of my life and things that I was going through. And I thought each season was its own book until I realized, at the end of the 18 years, that actually all of these seasons, each book that I thought I was writing actually each book made a chapter in itself. And so one of the seasons that I was walking through was that the Lord had asked me to stay above it. And that's the first chapter that I talk about in this book. I was in a prayer room in Alaska, and I had flew into Alaska the day before. So I saw Alaska from the beautiful trees, and it's just a stunning, as you can imagine, view. But the next day when I was in my prayer time, in a vision, I could see the tops of those trees, and I kept hearing the Lord say, "Stay above it, stay above it." And there was this kind of in the vision, I would see the beautiful green trees, but then I would see this black hole, and I kind of wanted to reach over and kind of see what was in the black hole. And I felt the Lord saying, "No, just stay above it." He would pull me back each time. And so in that, when I come back from that trip to Alaska, I started actually transitioning from having a church that me and my husband did, as it was just basically an outreach church inside of our indoor flea market. I started transitioning from that, going into actually social media. And the Lord told me to start going online, and that I could reach more that way and get out further and faster and actually cheaper. It's there's so much of it free, and your audience is wider, and I don't know, your demographic gets better, more, I would say better, but just more, and further, let's say further. And so, the transition from going to a full-time church and, not having the congregation anymore to actually just being me online. And that was a tough season. And one thing the Lord kept telling me is, I need you to relent. And I did not realize that I was that much of a strong-willed person, just because I'd always found myself to be a people pleaser. And I didn't think, I thought that I was really easy to get along and go along. But the Lord showed me that there was things in my life that I just would not take no for an answer. And I would plow through and not give up and not let go, and just let Him have His will and His way. So, that's what I struggled with at first, was just relenting and allowing it to be however He said it would be, no matter if it hurt somebody else's feelings. That's another chapter that I talk about in the book, is that I was such a people pleaser that sometimes I couldn't do the will of God, because if I felt like that the decisions I was making for my life bothered somebody else, then I would just back up and not fully walk in that season that I was supposed to for myself, because I didn't want to harm or make anybody else feel that I was slighting them in any way. So in ministry, that's a problem sometimes, because as a minister, the congregation gets used to your life being for them and for their needs and for their moments of need. And when I had to transition from that and start saying, no, I've got something else that the Lord wants me to do, specifically go in another season, that's kind of hard for people. So I didn't realize how much of a people pleaser I was. And I had to fight against my own self to not be, I had to almost come to this place where I had to leave their feelings in the Lord's hands. It wasn't for me to worry about. So that's a struggle. And that's something that when I was waiting on the Lord, when the Lord told me, each season, the Lord would tell me, this is what I need you to do. But then it would be a while before that thing happened. And that's where I was talking about waiting well in the book, is that when you know what God's going to do. He's already give you a vision or a word of knowledge, or a prophetic word that has come to you, and you know what you're going to be doing in the next season of your life. But then you have to wait until that next season, and that next season could be, a year, 2 years, 10 years, 18 years, 20 years, 30 years. I know a lady that's been waiting 30 years for a promise that she has been given from God, but she nevertheless doesn't believe it. She just continues to stay in faith and just knowing that it will happen in time. So that's kind of what the book is about, is learning how to listen to the Lord in these seasons and realize that every season you go through, there's something you will learn about yourself in that season. And there's something you'll learn about God and about his character and how he wants to transition you and your thinking, so that you are able to do his will on earth instead of your own will.
No, I completely agree. One of the things that stood out to me the most when you're talking about one of your seasons of waiting was your transition from in ministry to going to online presence.
Yes.
And, kind of turning from that people pleaser and kind of learning to say no and learning that initial habit. How was that, mentally? How did you learn to grasp that and, deal with that?
It was very hard. It was very hard. And there was a point in that I started to turn around and just go back and just reopen the church, because I was like, I don't want people to be hurt. I mean, people have leaned on me for a long time, and they're used to having access to me. And now I'm having to teach them that you can have access, but it just has to be online. And, a lot of people, I'm 54 years old. Not everybody that I know is on social media.
Right.
So, and even the older folks than me, struggle sometimes with social media. So I'm a part of a writers group. And that is one of the things that it's in Rutherford County. It's called the Encouragers Writers Group. And they're the ones who encouraged me and said, you know what, you can do this. Just start writing. And but those ladies are not all on social media. And so it's amazing how sometimes they're like, hey, will you do a class for us, and teach us some more about social media so that we can enjoy this with you? And but then some of them are on social media, and some of them have a big online presence. So, but it's just a whole different way of doing ministry. But I'm actually loving it. I'll tell you, the best thing I love about social media ministry is that I can do it from anywhere. And, and I can do it on my timetable, and I can be free to, when I say my timetable consists of, if the Lord tells me tomorrow, I need you to go to Cincinnati, then I'm on a plane going to Cincinnati. But I could still be able to minister wherever I'm at, so I love that aspect of it.
Well, especially in today's time, you can still reach so many people, whether it's via laptop, cell phone, and still get
all
that
over the
message.
world. Yeah, all over the world. And a lot of the ministry I do now is mentorship for young girls, like college age girls. And a lot of that I do just on FaceTime and Zoom, just or on the phone, just, when they need a call, they'll schedule a call with me. And I'm not a therapist, but I do have, basically 30 years of ministry. And so I don't charge for it, but a lot of young girls, and I don't share their names, but and many other states set up calls with me each and every week to just kind of go over their situations and just get some advice, or just have somebody to talk to.
We all go through different seasons where we're doing great, or maybe like hoping for more, facing troubling times, or things are going great. How do you navigate some of these times that maybe somebody's wanting something really bad, but it may not be in their time?
Oh, wow. That's the toughest part. I mean, that's even honestly where a lot of depression comes in. And I did face a depressing bout for 3 years in that 18-year period while I was waiting on this to come about. The best way to navigate it is to do the very first thing I said, is to relent your will. And the second thing would be to trust God's timing and to know. And I'll tell you this one little story. And I really felt like this was the biggest part of my story. When the Lord called me and told me, called me, but when I heard the calling that I was going to actually start a women's conference at Myrtle Beach, that was the thing I knew I was going to do. That was the ministry that God was going to pay for through my writing. And I knew it was just taking too long and a long time to do this. He actually, when I felt the call for that, I was married and I already had my daughter. And then it wasn't long after that my daughter needed to be homeschooled. So that actually took up so much of my time. My husband decided to start his life's work job, that actually he's an entrepreneur. And so that business took up a lot of our extra time and all of our extra money. And so, I was pulled at every end. I was also a minister at the local church that I was a part of. I was a women's minister there. And also I had a nonprofit organization that I started for deaf children. That was a ranch for deaf children to come to 1 week a month, 1 week a year. So I was kind of stretched thin, and none of that was looking like it was going to get me to the conference at Myrtle Beach. I mean, I couldn't even take time to breathe, much less take a few weekends away to go to Myrtle Beach and have a conference. So there was so much that was pulled on me. So then by the time I wrote the book, and we're talking by the time it was wrote and produced and actually started WiseWomen Conference, it's WiseWomen Retreats and Conferences. When I started that, we're talking 20 years. And by that time, when I first heard the call, I was 30. By the time I started the ministry after writing the book, I literally, this is 20 years later, I'm literally in my early 50s and I'm tired. And I've beat the depression over it. I've finally decided, okay, God, if you do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't. I don't know when it's coming. And that's the thing. He doesn't tell you when it's going to happen. So you're just sitting there waiting and trying to stay busy and do the things he tells you to do. So two things. Number one, I heard a pastor that had come to our church, a Moldovan pastor, and he said, he held up this big hand and he said, if you're waiting on God to have you do what he's called you to do and it's not happened, he said, do what you can put your hand to. And I'll never forget seeing his hand, thinking, okay, so I'm just going to do what's in front of me every day, and and trust that it'll lead me to that place. And then by the time I'm in my 50s and I finally started it, I was really excited, but I was also really tired. I was wore out from all the life that I had went through and the battles that I'd faced every day, just like every other person in the world. And I lost my mom. There's just so many different seasons that I'd been through. And I told the Lord, I said, I don't understand. I said, now that I get to do what you've called me to do, I'm tired. And, I've really went through a lot to get here and I'm beat down and wore out. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this now. And the Lord said to me, he said, did you not have a husband and a daughter when I called you? And I said, yes, I did. He said, I knew your situation and I knew what you were going to have to do. He said, but those things did not prolong things and wear you out. Those things actually qualified you. So now you are ready to do this. So if I could encourage anybody that's in a very long waiting season, I would say this, just know that the wait is not wasted. And everything you're going through will actually set you up and you will be qualified better to do the thing God told you he's going to do through you when you've went through these seasons to get to that major big season that, Moses, I think about him in the Bible, actually he wandered around in the desert 40 years before he ever wandered around with the children of Israel 40 years. I don't know if a lot of people knows that. So, I mean, he is the perfect example of someone that had to wait a really long time to do the thing God was telling him he was going to do.
Well, yeah, because everything, isn't exactly on our time, but time is really of the essence. Because, it's so important what we do with our time during these long periods.
It is. And staying in faith, trusting God, and just saying to the Lord, well, then teach me what you want me to know then. If there's something in this season that I don't understand and I don't like it, teach me, and just be teachable and receive from him. And there was a lot in me that had to be softened. There was a lot of things, even from my childhood, that I needed to deal with that even when I would preach for my pastor, when he would ask me to preach, some of the trauma that I had growing up would actually come out in my preaching, so, and I didn't even realize that. So there was things that God had to work on me for before I could be ready to move forward in this work that he's called me to.
Well, you touched on several different seasons, but how important is it for us to be diligent with our time during these different seasons, as far as to, not get too broken down, but to see the other side and, see what's coming.
Yeah. Diligence is, I'm sorry.
And to do the important stuff instead of, straying.
Yes, because idle hands really will get you in trouble, and I would say stay busy, continue. The best advice is to stay in the word, read the word daily and seek the Lord and journal your thoughts, journal your dreams, journal your prayers, because I'll tell you this, everything that you write down when the Lord is giving you these things through his word, or this from him speaking to you, you will see those things come about. Today, something happened in my life, and I was telling somebody about it, and the lady said to me, "Didn't you have a dream about this?" And I said, "I forgot about that." And so I actually had to go to my notes and punch in one word to even find it. And I'd had a dream a year ago, and I had already completely forgotten about that dream, but it came to pass today. So there's times, and there's so many things now that I find joy in going back to my notes. I have notebooks and notebooks of notes over the years of the things God had told me and the things I was believing for and trusting for. And that's the thing. Another thing I had to think about, there's some things I want to do, and then there's some things I'm called to do. And so I had to let God show me the difference between that. And he'll let us do the desires of our hearts, but it will be wrapped up in his will.
Well, can you talk about the difference, though, between being called upon something and the need of ourselves to want to do something?
Yeah. Sometimes our wants comes from something that we need fixed within us. One of the things I talk about in the book is the chapter that I learned to be alone. And I had a great need in my life to never be alone. And I did not realize that. I've always been a strong, independent person. Like I told you at the beginning of the podcast, I've always thought I was a strong, independent person, and I am. But I looked back in my life when this happened and the Lord called me away from everything and everybody just to go out on a limb with him. I realized that it was hard for me. I was used to having friends, and when God would give me a word of encouragement, I wanted to call somebody and say, "Hey, guess what God told me." And this season, God was like, "No, I'm going to give you a word, but I just want you to hold it." And I was like, "Wait a minute, wouldn't you want me to share this word and let somebody know?" No, you just hold that word. You keep that word. And so I had to learn that some of the things God was giving me was just for me. And it was just for me to maybe use at a later date. So I found that my need to have a lot of friends around and things going on was the fact that I needed something. And so I had to learn how to sit in my house and be quiet and actually not have the TV on. It was just a little test that I was doing for myself to say, how much noise do I really need around me to be content? And to not let my mind wander. Like if I'm in a completely silent room, can I really just be okay? Can I just say, okay, I'm going to read something. I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to, do some kind of thing that I like to do, or, just find something I wanted to do. I realized also in that time that there was a lot of things I did that was because of other people wanted to do it. When you are a wife and a mom, one of the main things you do is everything your husband wants to do and everything your children want to do. And you kind of lose yourself in that process. So at the end of that 18 years, my daughter was grown and she had moved out, and my husband was well going with his ministry. He didn't need my help anymore in that. So he had hired employees and things. So I found myself saying, okay, what is it that I want to do? And I really had almost lost myself and didn't know what I wanted to do. And then it came to pass, well, I really want to write that book that I've been trying to write. And I really want to start that women's conference at Myrtle Beach, because that was my heart. I knew God had told me that I would be doing that, and I saw myself there. And now I have done that for 3 years in a row now.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's important too, because you said it a little bit too in your speech, but it's so hard for people in today to just be alone in their thoughts by themselves.
Yes.
They struggle with that so much.
Yes. Yes. And that's something God taught me. And it came from, there was a need in me. And I also had kind of a Mr. Fix-It personality is the way I or I would say Mrs. Fix-It personality, but I just wanted to fix everything for everybody. And then I had to sit in that a while and say, okay, why do I think I have to fix anything or anybody? I don't. I have to live for the Lord, and I have to love the Lord and let my life inspire people to draw closer to Him, not demand that anybody draws closer to Him. So that was something that I learned in the waiting period too.
Well, in some of these different seasons, we've kind of touched on some of the struggling seasons, but some of the seasons where we're actually doing good and things are going great. Can you kind of touch on those as well, as far as, because those are waiting seasons as well?
Yes. Well, one of the biggest things through this process is I had wanted a home, and I'm a real estate agent now, but at the time I wasn't. And I had been wanting a home for my family. I didn't want to rent anymore. I wanted us to, be homeowners again through a series of events we had it. And there was just a lot that we had to do with all the businesses that we started and the ministries that we were part of. We never kept any money for us to be able to take care of, or to own a home or build a home. And one day the Lord just said to me, He said, "You're going to build a home." And He said, "I'm going to send you somebody to help you." And there was a man that actually in our county, he was what in my opinion and everything I've heard, the best builder in our county. He actually came out of retirement to build my home. And he walked with me through that process, and we were able, my husband and I were able to build a home debt free. So and in that process, of the 18 years of trying to write the book, there was 15 of those years I had been asking God for a home. And so in that process, that was one of the things I waited on, and it was a glorious moment to get it. And it made a believer out of my husband that, you know what, we can ask God and God will do this for us. So, and I'm sitting in that house right now.
Well, you talked about building a home debt free. How was you able to accomplish that?
My builder, I told my builder that my husband was going to allot so much money a week towards this fund. And then I was going to put my real estate sales in this fund. And when I got enough money, I said, I want you to tell me how I bought the land first. Okay. Bought the land. And then I said, I want you to tell me what it costs to build a foundation. And he said, okay, well, it's going to cost, X amount of dollars. So I said, well, when I get the X amount of dollars, I want you to build a foundation, and then I want you to stop until I get the money to frame up the walls. And so that's what we did. And through the whole building process, he waited on me to get the money together to do each process. And every process, he let me know ahead of time, okay, the windows, we need the windows next. So you're going to need X amount of dollars for the windows. And so when I got the money, we bought the windows and stored them in one of our buildings until we got to the point where we could, put the windows in. So that's what I mean. And he got people to work throughout every bit of the building process. He got people to do that with me, to walk with me through that, and just do the one process I need and then leave me alone until I get the next amount.
Well, in different stages of our life, we always try to, reach for the total end goal and go right to the end. But maybe by what I just heard, it's just as important to set these small goals, complete them, and create that momentum.
And at the end, I mean, they talk about that, great things come to those who wait. And that's probably one of the best ways to say this is you have to trust that the end of the thing is going to be better than you ever asked, dreamt, or imagined.
Well, whether we're prospering or in a season that's filled with unknowns, how have you learned to manage your emotions?
That's a good one. And I don't know that anybody that I know can manage their emotions, 100%. But I will tell you, one of the best things that I have learned to do is that when I feel that my emotions are getting out of control and I'm getting high strung and not waiting, I will tell myself, calm down. And if I feel like I'm about to get out of hand with my emotions, I will apologize to myself or to the Lord or to whoever I'm with or whoever I'm talking to, and say, you know what, I really went too far with that. Let me back up. And I just have not been afraid to back myself up. And so that keeps my emotions under control, because in my mind, I know how my emotions should look and how I should regulate, but it's not, I mean, that's easier said than done, so I think it's a daily process, and I'm not going to begin to tell you that I'm the best at regulating my emotions. But honestly, another thing that helps you regulate your emotions is when you truly want the Lord's will to be done above your comfort level. When you are not worried about what you're going through, you understand that what you're going through is for his kingdom. And another thing to regulate your emotions is to understand and have mercy and grace on other people, because a lot of things that sets us off is what other people say and do to us, against us, or against someone we love. But we have to realize that some people just need mercy and grace, and to realize that hurt people hurt people. And that's another way that it helps me regulate my emotions. When I realize if somebody tries to hurt me, I realize it's because they're hurt from some other reason, and I'm just the one, they're taking it out on. So there's a bunch of different tips and tricks that you can do, but a lot of it is to know scripture and just to say those things back to you, and to know that, God is for you, not against you. He has your best interest in mind, and he's not doing anything to hurt you. Sometimes our emotions get out of control for fear. We're fearful of the next steps, or we're fearful at what we see in front of us. But when we learn to trust that if God said it in his word, that he would take care of us, he would go before us, he would be our rear guard, he will watch over us. If he's told us he will do that, we have to trust that he will. And if something's going haywire, then it must be part of his plan. And that will regulate your emotions to say, this is not about me. And that's the biggest, I think a lot of us go through this season, a lot of seasons in our life where we think it's about us. We think that what we're going through is about us. But my husband and I, one time, we actually had to walk away from a church that we were a part of, and it really didn't make sense to other people, and a lot of it didn't make sense to us. But the Lord kept speaking to both of us and said, it's not about you, it's about your daughter. Right. And there was a season of our life that we actually could not be a part of a certain group because our daughter needed something else. And we had to realize, okay, this is about her. And so no matter what we've built here and what we think we should stay and do here, we have to understand that we've got a place we have to get her to, because we're responsible for her as long as the Lord's put her in our care. So.
Well, yeah, you brought up fear, and I had a guest on the show last week who brought up education is the cure to fear. So, I mean, if we educate ourselves, we can kind of get over that fear and bridge over that gap.
Knowledge is power, that I do believe that. And I believe that I get that knowledge from the Bible, from the words of God, and honestly, just reading and knowing things in the world, and, watching the news, being abreast of what's going on in the world. I do think that, yes, I do think that being informed, you can make a better educated decision. Yes. So I agree.
Often we want things to happen on our time, but how does waiting and being patient show us what's really meant for us?
If it's not meant for you, it'll fall off. That's what I say. If you wait long enough and there's something in your life that's not meant for you, and you keep waiting on the Lord to handle it for you, that thing will just fall away, and God will take it. He will remove it for you.
Well, yeah, there's a quote from your book that reads, and I think you may have touched on a little earlier when we first started, but one of the hardest times inside a season of waiting was when I did not recognize the season that was upon me. I also did not understand what it could mean for me, my family, and my friends if I would be willing to spend a season of my life reserved to be okay with waiting.
Yeah.
I didn't know how beautiful and safe I could feel to do so. Could you expand on that?
Yes. Waiting doesn't feel like it's safety. Sometimes we think that we have to jump from, season to season really quickly and not have any in-between space. Sometimes the in-between space is really tough. So it doesn't feel safe. But actually, when you're waiting, it gives not only God time to work, but it gives other people in your life time to get to where you're at. So I think sometimes when, let's say the Lord gives me a revelation of something he wants me to do, well, I can't just expect that my husband and my daughter both understand exactly what I'm talking about. And they might not be in places in their life that they're ready to take that step with me. But when God speaks to me and tells me something he wants me to do, if I wait on him, then in the waiting, he will move their life around. And this is something I bring out in the book. God is the best chess player you will ever meet in your life. He will play chess and he will move the pieces and the people around. And there's things that you won't have to do, and you won't have to set yourself up for the fall on things. But just if you'll wait out the time, he will allow things to move around and fall around. And by the time it's time to move, those who are supposed to go with you will be able to move forward with you, and they will be ready, and they will be excited, and they will have caught the vision. So sometimes the waiting season is just letting your loved ones catch the vision with you, giving them time to wrap their head around it. And so that's what I mean. If I could be reserved to say, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I need to wait until it's time, then it's a beautiful thing, because then I get to take the ones I love with me, because they're ready for it and they're prepared, and their lives are set up for it as well.
Right. I mean, it's great that we get to do stuff, by ourselves, but it's even better when we get to bring someone along.
Exactly. Yeah, and enjoy it, and them to be able to grow with you. One of the toughest things of any family, and that's one of my heart, is to, I'm a builder at heart. I really am. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I want to build a house, but I'm a builder at heart, and I love to build people. I love to build ministries. I love to build businesses. Me and my husband have started like 22 businesses in our 33 years of being married, and we started tons of ministries. And I'm a builder at heart, but I love to see people grow, but I don't want to do it alone. I really don't. I want people to go with me, and I want to grow together and not leave anybody behind because they just weren't ready for me to just keep jumping from, space to space without leaving time and space for them to grow into it with me.
Well, yeah, that makes total sense. As far as, because a lot of focus of this particular podcast has been about time.
Yeah.
Well,
It is.
Well, you mentioned the 22 different businesses and adventures you guys have taken.
Mm-hmm.
Did one kind of lead you to the next one?
Of course, it did. And some overlapped for a season, and that was hard. It seems like me and my husband have kept 3 jobs and 2 or 3 ministries going at all times, until as of late, but we still have several businesses right now. And then the ministry we do is the WiseWomen Conference, and then the social media. So yes, we still have, but I'm sorry, your question again was?
What?
Lost my train of thought.
No, you're fine. The 22 businesses that you have started over the years,
Mm-hmm.
did all those kind of lead into each other?
Yes, some led into each other and some overlapped each other, and some was just there for a season to sustain us until we could get to the next. I call it a port. In the book, I talk about a captain on a ship. And I guess because, I'm a coastal girl at heart, even though I live 4.5 hours from the coast, I still haven't figured out. I told the Lord, I said, I don't know why you had me born and live 4.5 hours from the coast when I'm a coastal girl at heart. But so I relate everything to a ship, and that when you're on that ship and you're going from port to port, there's a lot that happens on the way, but there's some things that a captain will just stop, and they will go to a port and get a run to catch a few fish that has nothing to do with the fish that they might normally catch tuna. But if tuna season's not going, it's not in right then they have to go catch a different species of fish to be able to pay the bills. So some of the businesses that we've done and some of the ministries was just to be able to sustain us in a season to wait for the next season. And then some, built us, and all of them, the Bible talks about that all things work together to those. All things work together to the good of those who love the Lord and are called to according to his purpose. And that is exactly what I feel like these seasons of waiting and the businesses and the ministries, all these were opportunities of things that built us to be able to get us to where we are today, and to be able to qualify us to be able to speak into anybody's life and to minister to somebody else.
Well, yeah, because all these different opportunities allowed you these different avenues to meet and grow and expand.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I wouldn't trade it. If I had to go back and do it all again, I would do everything exactly the same way. Would I have not pouted as much through some of those waiting seasons? Yes. Would I have not cried? And I will be honest with you. There was a one of the waiting seasons, I wanted it to end at any cost. Does that make sense? I was so tired of waiting and not understanding why I felt like I should be doing this, but I was over here doing something totally different in a total different space. So I'm not going to try to sit here and act like it's all hunky-dory and glory now. It was a very hard, long process. And I minister. One of the things I minister to people about is they call me when they're in those different seasons. It could be anything from, waiting on a husband or trying to get into college or, wanting to build a house or trying to get pregnant, to have a child. There's so many different things that women face that, you have to wait for. It's not always in your timing. And so, yes, I don't regret it. I wouldn't change it, but I would change me. Sometimes I think the waiting season is quicker when you do better through it. Does that mean when you trust God fully and you don't pout and you don't cry and you don't throw a fit and you don't get mad and you just actually just receive it and accept it and realize that this is his will and this is what he wants you to do at this moment. I think those seasons seem like they're quicker to get through to the next season.
Well, if I interpret it correctly, if the seasons that you were able to take something from and actually be in the moment without trying to, rush the moment and instead just kind of embracing it.
Yes. Yes. Right now, I actually had a dream 2 nights ago where I put this on a little story about it on my Facebook, but it came from a dream, and I saw myself in a safe harbor. And I knew that I needed to get on the open ocean, but there was actually a storm in the mouth of that safe harbor, and it was just churning. And I was on a boat, on a ship with a captain, and the captain looked at me, and we nodded at each other, and it was like, I've got to go through this storm. I've got to go from this safe harbor out to the open ocean, and there was people out there that I needed to be with, and I needed to minister to, and I needed to get there. But the captain looked at me and let me know that we've got to go through this storm to get there. And I shook my head yes. And the captain motioned for me to go into a threshold of a doorway that was on the ship and brace myself. And then the captain took us through the storm, and then we made it to the other side of peace. And so that to me was God giving me a sign that there is a season that you're fixing to go through, that you're in a place of peace right now. You're enjoying this moment, but you're fixing to walk through another storm, but there will be peace on the other side. And this time I'm choosing to walk better through this season. Yes.
Well, you talk about how you transition, you kind of seen that season kind of approaching.
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Have you coached other people, or can you see, like as they speak to you, can you see the seasons kind of approaching for them and how they kind of transition through those?
Yes, actually at the WiseWomen conference last year, the Lord actually gave me another leg of this ministry, and he challenged me to have the women ask me what I see. And so I made a couple little, I told the ladies at the conference, I said, we have about a 5-hour break on Saturday afternoon. And I said, if you want to meet with me, I'll make a little 15-minute interval for each lady that would like to meet. And you can explain your situation to me, and I'll tell you what I see in it. And I had a few ladies set up, as before the weekend was over, there was about 7 different ladies that I met with. And every one of them, and people I'd never met before from different states, okay, never had laid eyes on them or knew them at all, that had come to the conference. And every one of them, as they were talking about their situation, the Lord would literally speak to me about, this is where you're at, or this is what's fixing to happen, or this is what you're needing to do, and every one of them would just break down and cry. And so yes, I am able to share with women sometimes when they explain their situation to me. I can definitely see what stage of the waiting they're in, and maybe give them some pointers on where they need to be or what they need to be looking for, and some things they can do while they're waiting. So yes, I do that.
Throughout the book and the different seasons, what were some of the gems that you were able to pick up and collect during these different seasons that's helped you grow and learn from those different seasons?
Um,
Because I
the
know
gems,
patience was definitely one.
definitely patience. I would say the biggest is to have mercy and grace. That's something that I'm ashamed to say that even in ministry all throughout the years, I don't know that I gave as much mercy and grace as I should to others who are going through hard seasons. And going through the hard seasons, I learned to not judge others and maybe have some mercy and grace when they're going. Because I was very quick, because I had gotten saved when I was 9 years old, and I've been a Christian all my life, basically. And I knew the word of God. I always went to church. And so there were things that I thought, well, if you're a Christian, you wouldn't do this. Or if you're a Christian, you wouldn't do that. But what happened was, when I didn't realize, when you're going through certain seasons, not that God's going to have you go out and do blatant sins, anything like that, but there are things sometimes that you do that other people don't understand. And from the outside looking in, it looks like you're doing the wrong thing. But sometimes it's the very thing that God needs you to do to get you protected from a certain thing or get you to another season. And you just don't know what somebody else is going through. And sometimes when you see them do something wrong, for them, it's the lesser of all evils, if that makes sense. I think that's probably the best hidden gem I found, is that when I see somebody doing something that I think they shouldn't do, I realize that may have been their only choice in the moment.
No, that makes total sense, because we don't never know what somebody else is going through or what it took them to get to that position.
Right. Yes.
Well, I like to leave all my podcasts with a final thought from my guest.
Mm-hmm.
Your book is titled Waiting Well, Winning Strategies for Your Season of Waiting. What's some strategies that you would recommend for other people during their season of waiting?
In the season of waiting, I guess the one strategy I would say is to find your moment each day that is your moment, minus the mornings. And I would say, when I get up and I put my feet on the floor in the mornings, I say to myself, and I put my finger up there and I say, the mornings are mine. And I do things that are specific to what I want to do for my morning. Some people, it's drink coffee out on the porch. I don't drink coffee, but some people, that's their thing. It's whatever is your thing. And the thing that can center you and give you a moment of pause before you start your day. Some people may need to do it in the afternoon. Some people may do it late at night. Maybe go in your bedroom, shut the door, and have that peaceful time before you drift off to sleep. But have a time that's for you to center yourself and be at peace with yourself, at peace with the world, and then open the Bible and find scriptures that make sure that you are at peace with God. And I would also say journaling. Write down everything, whether you think it's from God or whether you don't, write it down. But everybody has those moments or those thoughts they have. They're like, wow, this thought come to me. Write the thought down, because you never know what it'll materialize. And you don't, and when you've written it down, when other things come, you can expound on that and build on it. So journaling is a big thing. And then honestly, setting your heart to follow Jesus, setting your heart to truly want the Lord's will in heaven to be done on earth. That is, I think, one of the biggest keys is when we stop saying, Lord, I want to do these things. We say, Lord, I want to do these things, but I want to do these things to bring you glory. And I think that God cares about everything you care about. And I think that God can find glory in anything you do. But you have to make sure that what you're doing is his will for your life, and you're going on the path he's called you to. So seeking him daily is the biggest key to making sure that you're doing what he wants you to, because that's when you'll find the most fulfillment, is when you're doing the will of the Lord on the earth as he's created you to do. I believe he's created every person with a purpose and a plan. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't know my purpose, and I'm X amount of years old, and I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, now's a good time. And take it from somebody who's 54 years old and didn't really start, to write the book and do the ministry she was meant to do all these years. For 50, it was about 52. I was 52 when it really took off the way it's supposed to. So the way I had it in my mind and the way I felt like it was going to. So just realize it's never too late, and no waiting season is wasted. Nothing's wasted. God will use it all for your good and for his glory.
Thank you so much for sharing all the tips. They were great. The
Thank you.
book is Waiting Well, Winning Seasons, Winning Strategies for Your Season of Waiting. You can
Yes.
find the book on Amazon and
Mhm.
at what was
Jeff's
the store?
Variety store in Forest City, North Carolina. Yes.
It was so good having you on the podcast and learning from you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate it. And I pray blessings over your ministry and your podcast. I think you're doing a great work, and I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.